Ziwala's life in the village of Lenkara was simple but filled with joy. She was a kind, soft-spoken girl who always carried a warm smile on her face. The villagers often admired her manners and her gentle nature. Being the only child of her father, Makuzi, she was the light of his life. Makuzi, a respected trader, loved Ziwala deeply and did everything in his power to raise her with care and dignity after her mother's death. Though Ziwala never got to know her mother, she never complained. Her father's love was enough for her. Every morning, she would sweep the compound, help in cooking, and greet the elders in the village with deep respect. Children loved to play around her, and elders always blessed her wherever she went. Her life was not full of riches, but it was rich in love and peace. One morning, everything began to change. Makuzi, returning from one of his trading journeys, brought a surprise. He had remarried. The woman's name was Ndaga, a widow from a faraway village called Nyavo. She came with soft words and elegant clothes, her face calm and polite. Ziwala, with her innocent heart, ran to hug her and called her Mama Ndaga, hoping that this woman would finally fill the empty space left by her late mother. Her young heart was filled with hope and excitement. Maybe now their home would be warmer. Maybe now she would have someone to braid her hair, share stories with, or teach her how to cook new meals. Ziwala smiled wider than ever, thinking this new beginning would be a blessing. But it didn't take long before the smiles began to disappear. Ndaga's polite tone slowly turned into cold stares. Her soft voice became sharp whispers. Ziwala noticed how Ndaga would look at her with strange eyes that held something bitter, something dark. At first, it was small things. Ndaga ignoring her greetings, pretending not to see her when she entered the room, or making her repeat simple tasks again and again. Ziwala thought maybe she was just adjusting to the new home, so she stayed quiet. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. Little did Ziwala know the woman she had welcomed with so much love was the very one who would turn her world upside down. At first, everyone thought Ndaga was a blessing to Makuzi's home. She walked with grace, smiled at neighbors, and spoke in gentle tones when people were around. But the moment Makuzi left for his long trade journeys, something terrifying began to unfold. The woman who once wore smiles like a crown now wore cruelty like armor. Her eyes, once soft, now turned cold and sharp. Behind closed doors, her words became poison, her actions unbearable. Ziwala, full of innocence and hope, was the first to feel the shift. It started with insults, small jabs, whispered like venom. Ndaga would stand in front of her and sneer. "You think you're special? You're just a useless girl with your dead mother's eyes." Those words cut deep, stabbing Ziwala in places her young heart didn't know could hurt. But she said nothing. She just looked down, swallowed her pain, and forced a smile. Soon, things grew worse. Ndaga turned Ziwala into a housemaid. Every morning before sunrise, she was ordered to sweep the compound, fetch water from the distant stream, wash piles of clothes, clean every corner of the house, and cook meals she wasn't even allowed to eat. She worked from dawn till dusk, her little hands trembling with exhaustion. But still, she obeyed without complaint. While Ndaga relaxed in the shade, sipping sweet palm wine and gossiping with neighbors, Ziwala toiled in silence. Her once bright clothes were replaced with rags. Her shoes were taken away. Sometimes, she was given only leftovers to eat, dry crumbs, burnt crusts, or cold porridge. Other times, she ate nothing at all. But the hunger wasn't even the worst part. It was the loneliness, the silence that surrounded her cries at night. She would bury her face in her thin blanket and weep quietly, not wanting anyone to hear her pain. And yet, in the middle of all that suffering, Ziwala never lost her heart. Her kindness didn't fade. She still greeted the villagers with respect. She still helped the old woman who lived nearby carry firewood. She still gave her portion of food to stray animals when no one was watching. Her soul remained gentle, untouched by the cruelty thrown at her. Sometimes the neighbors wondered why Ziwala looked thinner, quieter, sadder, but Ndaga always had a quick excuse. "She's just growing up," she would say with a fake smile. No one suspected the truth behind closed doors. And Makuzi? He remained unaware. Every time he came home from his trips, Ndaga would act like a loving stepmother. She would serve Ziwala food in front of him, braid her hair, and speak kind words. But as soon as he left, the mask dropped again, and the nightmare returned. Ziwala lived in a prison without bars, locked in by cruelty, silence, and fear. But even in that darkness, her spirit glowed like a candle in the wind, flickering, but never going out. Little did Ndaga know, the same girl she tried to break would one day rise stronger than ever, and the world would witness it. Even though her life was filled with pain and hardship, Ziwala never allowed hatred to take root in her heart. Every day, she woke up before the sun, carrying out her endless chores without complaint. While her hands were roughened by labor and her clothes hung in tatters, her heart remained soft and full of kindness. She could have grown bitter, angry, or rebellious, but she didn't. Instead, she chose to spread love wherever she went. When she went to the stream to fetch water, she would stop to help the elderly carry their loads. If she saw hungry children playing with empty stomachs, she would secretly share the little scraps she had hidden in her pocket. If an injured bird fell near the compound, she would gently wrap it in cloth and feed it water drop by drop. Her kindness knew no boundaries. Even when she herself had nothing, the villagers began to notice her gentle spirit. They would often whisper among themselves, "That girl, Ziwala, she's different. Her heart is made of gold." Even those who didn't know her well felt drawn to her calm presence and warm smile. Despite her ragged appearance, there was something royal about her, a quiet strength, a hidden glow that no suffering could dim. One day, while she was helping to sweep the compound of a sick elderly woman nearby, Elder Jacoya, one of the village's most respected men, walked by and paused. He looked at her with kind eyes and said, "Child, you carry light in your heart. One day, that light will lead the way." His words stayed with Ziwala. She held them close, repeating them to herself at night when tears soaked her pillow. They gave her a little hope, a tiny spark in the middle of her dark world. But not everyone admired her light. Ndaga grew more bitter each day. It burned her soul to hear neighbors speak well of Ziwala. She hated how people greeted the girl with respect, how children ran to her with joy, how elders prayed for her. Jealousy ate deep into her heart like poison. "Why do they see her and not me?" she would mumble to herself. Her hatred grew fiercer, and her punishments harsher. She tried to bury Ziwala under more work, more insults, more pain, thinking maybe that would dim the girl's shine. But the more Ndaga tried to break her, the more Ziwala's goodness showed. Her light was not from anything she wore or owned. It came from within. And no matter how cruel the world around her became, Ziwala's soul remained a garden of kindness, blooming silently in the shadows. And though she didn't know it yet, the seeds she was planting, through every small act of love, were quietly preparing the ground for something extraordinary to grow, something that would one day change everything. Ndaga's jealousy had grown into full hatred. Every day, as she watched Ziwala being praised by the villagers, her heart burned with envy. Her bitterness twisted her thoughts, and soon she began planting seeds of evil. She knew that as long as Makuzi loved and trusted Ziwala, she could never have full control over the home. So, she began her wicked plan, to turn father against daughter. She waited for the right moment. One evening, as Makuzi returned from a short journey, Ndaga sat quietly in the corner, her face sad, eyes red as if she had been crying all day. Makuzi, surprised, rushed to her side and asked what was wrong. That was the moment Ndaga unleashed her lies. "She hates me," she whispered, with a voice full of fake sorrow. "Ziwala. She curses me when you are not around. She throws words at me with hidden meaning. She pretends to be sweet outside, but inside this house, she's a different person." Makuzi was shocked. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "No, not Ziwala," he said, confused. But Ndaga didn't stop. She began to cry loudly, shaking her head. "She looks at me with anger in her eyes. I try my best to love her, but she has rejected me. I came into this house with love, but all I receive is disrespect." Ziwala, who stood quietly behind the wall, overheard everything. Her heart shattered into pieces. She couldn't believe her stepmother would lie so boldly. Tears rolled down her face, but she didn't rush out to defend herself. She just stood there, silent, hurt, and confused. As days passed, Ndaga kept repeating her lies. Slowly, Makuzi started to believe her. Whenever Ziwala tried to speak with him, he seemed cold and distant. He no longer asked how her day was. He no longer smiled at her. He started avoiding her completely. The loving father who once held her close was now slipping away, pulled by the strings of a wicked woman's lies. Ziwala felt the pain deeply. It was worse than hunger, worse than any chore. It was the ache of watching her father, her only family, become a stranger. And then, one fateful day, Ndaga took her wickedness to the next level. She staged a scene. While Makuzi was around, she pretended to fall and cry out in pain. She blamed Ziwala. "She pushed me!" Ndaga screamed. "Your daughter pushed me to the ground." Ziwala was shocked. "No, Baba, I didn't touch her," she cried. But Makuzi didn't even look at her. The seed of doubt had already grown roots in his heart. Ndaga stood behind him, smirking secretly, knowing her plan was working perfectly. What Ziwala didn't know was, this was only the beginning. Ndaga had darker plans ahead, plans that would break Ziwala even more. But what Ndaga failed to understand was this: when you try to bury someone with lies and pain, you might be planting a seed that grows stronger than you can ever imagine. It was a quiet morning when everything changed forever. The birds were singing softly, and the sun peeked gently through the trees. Ziwala had just finished sweeping the compound when she heard a loud scream from inside the house. It was Ndaga's voice, sharp and furious. "She stole my golden bracelet!" Ndaga screamed, running out of the house with a dramatic expression on her face. She held her wrist high, pointing to the spot where the bracelet used to be. "My most precious bracelet, the one my mother gave me. It's gone, and I know exactly who took it." Ziwala froze. Her heart started pounding. She had never touched anything that didn't belong to her. Her hands began to shake as Ndaga's eyes locked onto her with burning rage. "You wicked girl! You've finally shown your true colors. You want to rob this house after everything I've done for you," Ndaga shouted, making sure the neighbors could hear. Ziwala stepped forward, trembling. "I didn't take anything," she said softly. "I swear, Mama Ndaga, I didn't touch your bracelet." But Ndaga was not interested in truth. She had planned this moment. She wanted Ziwala out, and this was the perfect trap. Just then, Makuzi returned from the market. Before Ziwala could explain, Ndaga rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "She's a thief," she cried. "She's been stealing from me while you've been away. Today it's my bracelet. What will it be tomorrow?" Makuzi looked at Ziwala with disappointment in his eyes. His heart was tired, worn down by all the lies Ndaga had been feeding him. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wait for the truth. He turned to Ziwala and said in a heavy voice, "Pack your things and leave." Ziwala gasped. Her knees weakened. "Baba, please. You know I would never steal. Please believe me." But Makuzi walked away silently. That silence cut deeper than any insult. The man who once protected her had now turned his back completely. Ndaga threw a small bundle of old clothes at Ziwala's feet. "Take your rags and go. You don't belong here." With tears streaming down her cheeks, Ziwala picked up the bundle. She looked around at the home where she had laughed as a child, where her mother once held her in her arms, where her father once sang her to sleep. Now, that home had become a place of pain and rejection. With no one to turn to, she walked slowly toward the forest path. Her bare feet touched the cold ground. The trees stood tall and silent, as if watching her sorrow. Birds flew over her head, and the wind whispered around her, but no voice called her back. No hand reached out to stop her. She was completely alone. As she disappeared into the shadows of the forest, her heart broke in silence. She had nothing. No food, no shelter, no love, only pain, betrayal, and questions. But life has a strange way of turning pain into power. What Ziwala didn't know was that this painful journey was about to lead her to something far greater than she had ever imagined. The same forest where she walked in tears would soon witness her rise, from rejection to destiny. Ziwala wandered aimlessly through the forest, hungry, tired, and weak. Her feet were swollen, her clothes torn, and her heart shattered. For days, she walked without knowing where she was going, guided only by the tears in her eyes and the hope that maybe, just maybe, life would show her a little mercy. The sun scorched her skin during the day, and the cold winds chilled her bones at night. She had no food, no shelter, no familiar face. She was completely alone in a world that had turned its back on her. On the third day, her body could take no more. Her legs gave up, and she collapsed near a quiet riverbank. The water flowed gently beside her, but Ziwala couldn't even lift her hand to drink. Her eyes fluttered shut, and she drifted into unconsciousness, thinking this might be the end. But fate had other plans. At that very moment, an old woman named Nabiri was gathering herbs nearby. She was a well-known herbalist from the neighboring village of Mporo, a place known for its peaceful people and healing traditions. When Nabiri saw the fragile body lying near the water, her heart filled with concern. She rushed to Ziwala, felt her weak pulse, and immediately knew this girl needed help. Without hesitation, Nabiri carried Ziwala back to her hut in Mporo. She cleaned her wounds, fed her broth, and nursed her back to strength. For days, Ziwala lay in a soft bed made of woven grass, her body healing slowly under Nabiri's care. When Ziwala finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the warm smile of the woman who saved her. "You have been through pain, my child," Nabiri said gently, placing a hand on her forehead. "But pain is not the end. Sometimes, it is the beginning of something greater." Ziwala felt a tear roll down her cheek. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. As weeks passed, Ziwala began helping Nabiri around the healing hut. She learned how to grind herbs, mix healing pastes, and treat fevers. But soon, something extraordinary happened. Ziwala discovered a gift within her. Her hands seemed to carry warmth that calmed pain. Her gentle touch could stop a headache. When she wrapped a wound, it healed faster than expected. Even the villagers started noticing. "Her touch is like magic," they whispered. "This girl carries a blessing." Word spread quickly through Mporo. People came from neighboring villages to be healed by the soft-spoken girl with kind eyes and healing hands. They called her Ziwala, the healer. The same girl who was thrown out of her home was now becoming a blessing to many. But even in her new life, Ziwala remained humble. She never forgot where she came from or how far she had fallen. She smiled at children, helped elders carry firewood, and fed hungry travelers with whatever little she had. The pain that once tried to break her had now made her stronger, and far away, in her old village, the people who had cast her out had no idea that the girl they rejected was rising, becoming a light in another land. But fate was not done yet. Ziwala's story was only beginning, and the day would come when those who hurt her would need the same hands they once pushed away. Ziwala's hands, once used to scrub floors and carry firewood, were now bringing healing and comfort to people from all across the land. What began as small acts of kindness in the village of Mporo had grown into something much bigger than anyone ever imagined. People traveled for days, crossing rivers and climbing hills, just to see the girl with the gentle spirit and magical hands. She welcomed the rich and poor alike, treating them all with the same warmth and care. Even powerful chiefs and wealthy traders left their palaces to come to her humble healing hut, seeking relief from pain and sickness. But Ziwala never let fame change her. She didn't care for gold or gifts. She didn't build tall walls or live in a big house. Whenever someone tried to offer her riches, she would smile softly and say, "I only ask for your blessing and a kind heart in return." Her words touched people deeply, and they began to respect her even more. As her reputation grew, Ziwala saw something else. Young girls with dreams, but no opportunity. Some were orphans like her, others were mistreated in their homes. Just like she once was, she saw her own story in their eyes. So, she made a decision that would change many lives. She gathered a few of the girls and began to teach them everything she had learned: how to crush herbs, how to read the signs of illness, how to speak kindly to patients. She didn't just teach healing, she taught hope. Soon her small healing hut became a center of learning and care. More girls joined, and people started calling it Ziwala's Center of Light. The village of Mporo transformed too. Once a quiet place, it now became known across the region as the Land of Healing. The people who once saw Ziwala as just a broken girl now looked at her with deep admiration and pride. They told stories of how she came from nothing, yet gave everything. Even traveling elders and wise men said, "Ziwala is not just a healer, she is a blessing to our land." But deep in Ziwala's heart, she remained humble. Every night, she would sit under the stars, thinking about her father, her old village, and the stepmother who broke her spirit. Sometimes, tears would quietly fall down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the weight of her journey. She had come so far, and yet, she knew, destiny was not finished with her yet. She felt something in her heart, a quiet voice telling her that her past would return in a way she never expected. That someday, someone from her old life would walk back into her world. But this time, she would not be the weak girl with teary eyes. She would be Ziwala the healer, the light that even darkness could not destroy. Her story was far from over. In fact, the most surprising part was yet to come. In the village of Lenkara, things had changed. The once proud stepmother Ndaga now lay helpless on a mat, her body twisted in pain. Her skin burned with rashes that no herb could soothe. Her hands shook like dry leaves in the wind, and her voice came out in weak, trembling whispers. Day and night, she screamed in agony, clutching her chest, her stomach, her back. Every part of her body seemed cursed with a pain no one could explain. Makuzi, once so strong and respected, now sat quietly beside her, his face pale with worry. He had brought every healer from nearby villages, but none of them could help. They gave her roots to chew, oils to rub, powders to drink, but nothing worked. The pain only grew worse, and so did the fear in her eyes. Villagers whispered in corners. Some said it was a punishment from the ancestors. Others believed it was karma. The evil she sowed had returned to her doorstep. Even those who once admired her now stayed away from the house, afraid the sickness might spread, or perhaps afraid of the darkness that clung to her spirit. Ndaga, once so proud, now cried like a child. "Please, help me. Someone help me," she begged. But there was no help to give. She had driven away the one person who could have saved her, the same girl she had thrown into the forest with nothing but a bundle of clothes. One evening, as Makuzi wiped her forehead and listened to her sobs, Elder Jacoya walked into the house. His eyes were heavy with sadness, but his voice was calm. "Makuzi," he said softly, "there is only one healer who may know what to do, only one who carries the kind of light this darkness cannot stand." Makuzi raised his head slowly, confused. "Who?" he asked with a broken voice. Elder Jacoya took a deep breath. "Your daughter, Ziwala." The name struck Makuzi like thunder. His hands froze. His eyes blinked in disbelief. The girl he had cast out, the daughter he abandoned, was now the only hope for his dying wife. Ndaga heard the name too. Her eyes widened with shock and her lips trembled. "No, not her," she whispered. But deep in her heart, she knew. Her cruelty had pushed away the one person who could now save her life. Makuzi stood, unsure of what to do. Guilt stabbed his chest like a knife. How could he go to Ziwala after everything they had done to her? Would she even agree to return? Would she even listen? But pain leaves no pride, and fear knows no shame. They had no choice. If Ziwala didn't return, Ndaga would die. The journey back to Ziwala was about to begin, not with pride or power, but with tears, regret, and begging feet. And what happened next would leave the entire village speechless. When Ziwala heard that her stepmother was dying and that no healer could cure her, she sat in silence. Her heart did not rush with joy or revenge. Instead, her eyes turned calm, and she quietly looked out toward the horizon. Her students, those she had trained in healing and compassion, gathered around her with confused expressions. One of them spoke gently. "Mama Ziwala, will you truly go back to the woman who destroyed your life?" Ziwala smiled softly. "If I carry hatred in my heart," she said, "I will become just like her. But if I choose to heal her, then I also heal myself." The words touched everyone deeply. No one could understand how a woman who suffered so much could still choose love over hate. But that was the power of Ziwala. Her strength came not from revenge, but from peace. With her healing basket in hand and her long scarf fluttering in the wind, Ziwala began her journey back to the village of Lenkara. The same path where her feet once dragged in sorrow now echoed with quiet strength and dignity. She was no longer the broken girl who was sent away in shame. She was now Ziwala the healer, honored, wise, and respected. When she reached her father's compound, the villagers came out, their eyes wide with surprise. Children whispered, "Is that really Ziwala?" Elders bowed their heads in respect, and inside the house, Ndaga lay weak, trembling with pain, her eyes sunken with guilt and regret. The door opened, and Ziwala stepped inside. The scent of herbs and sorrow filled the air. Ndaga's eyes met hers. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came from her dry lips. Why would you come back?" Ziwala looked at her calmly and knelt beside her. "Because even those who hurt us deserve a chance to change." With gentle hands, Ziwala prepared a healing brew. She wrapped cool cloth around Ndaga's burning skin, rubbed her back with calming oil, and whispered words of comfort. Every touch was filled with kindness, the same kindness that had once been rejected. Makuzi, standing in the corner, wiped his tears. He had never felt such shame and pride at the same time. He watched his daughter do what no one else could, not only heal wounds of the body, but also the wounds of the heart. Days passed, and slowly, Ndaga's pain began to ease. Her hands stopped shaking, her skin cleared, her voice returned, but most importantly, her heart began to soften. One day, with tears rolling down her cheeks, she held Ziwala's hand and said, "I was wrong. I don't deserve your kindness, but thank you." Ziwala smiled, not with pride, but with peace. It was never about what you deserved. It was about who I choose to be. The entire village watched in awe. They had witnessed something greater than medicine. They saw the healing power of forgiveness. And from that moment on, Ziwala was not only known as a healer of the body, but a healer of broken souls. As the days passed and Ndaga's strength returned, something within her began to change, something deeper than just her healing body. One afternoon, she sat quietly by the window, watching the sun paint golden rays across the sky. And then, the weight of everything she had done came crashing down on her heart. Tears flowed freely from her eyes, tears she had held in for years. She walked slowly to where Ziwala was mixing herbs for a new patient and dropped to her knees, her voice trembling. "I wronged you, I destroyed you, yet you saved me," Ndaga whispered, her voice choked with guilt and pain. Ziwala gently turned to her, no anger in her eyes, only peace. "I forgave you the moment I left this house," she replied softly. "Hatred is a burden I will never carry." Those words broke Ndaga even more. How could someone she had treated with such cruelty still choose forgiveness? That day, her heart melted, her pride, her bitterness, her jealousy. Everything she had held onto for years disappeared like dust in the wind. And from that moment, Ndaga began to change. She didn't want to be the woman she once was. She started helping in Ziwala's healing center, humbling herself to fetch water, clean wounds, and care for the sick. She no longer wore expensive wrappers or demanded attention. Instead, she served quietly, learning compassion from the very girl she once tried to destroy. And as she served, she found peace, a peace she never thought she could have. Makuzi, Ziwala's father, also could not hold back his guilt. One evening, he sat with his daughter under the stars, tears in his eyes. "Ziwala, I failed you," he said, his voice shaking. "I should have protected you. I should have believed you." But Ziwala gently placed her hand over his. "The past is gone, Baba," she said, with a kind smile. "Let us heal the future." And so, life took a new turn. Ziwala's healing center grew larger. More people came, not just for medicine, but for hope. Her name spread across the land, not just as a healer of bodies, but as a mender of hearts and spirits. She became a living legend, a symbol of grace, forgiveness, and quiet strength. In the end, karma had played its role, not through revenge, but through transformation. And the story of Ziwala became one the villagers told for generations, reminding everyone that kindness is not weakness. And sometimes, the one you mistreat may be the only one who saves you. If this story touched your heart, remember, kindness has power, and forgiveness heals more than hatred ever could. Don't let this message stop here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel for more heart-touching stories like this. Let love and light continue to spread.